I'm talking about the way in which the woke activists, first of all, pretend like there's nothing distinctive about their own ideology, there's nothing controversial about it. They are merely teaching about facts like slavery, facts like segregation. Well, let me ask you this. Do they teach the fact that there were, between 1820 and 1860, over 3,000 black slave owners in America? They don't teach that. I've never seen that taught in schools. I've never seen it in a textbook. I've actually never seen it even mentioned in any context surrounding education, even though it's well documented historically. So then why isn't it being taught? Well, it isn't being taught because it blows the argument of reparations out of the water. Because after all, if you're a black guy and you're descended not from a slave, but from a slave owner, would you have to pay reparations? So the wokesters don't want to deal with this kind of messy fact. So they're like, let's just leave that one out. Let's ignore that part of history. Or take another big mantra, which is at the root of the reparations and the slavery debate, that somehow slavery destroyed the black family. Now, this is again taken as an article of faith. And again, superficially, there's a case to be made for it. Why? Because after all, we know that under slavery, families were broken up. In some cases, not all that often, but it did happen. Children are sold off. Husbands are separated from wives. And so what happens is the family is under enormous stress under slavery. And so it's very tempting to believe that the problems of the black family today, even all these many years later, is somehow traceable to slavery. Now, the only problem with that is that if you go to the aftermath of slavery, which is the late 19th century, and then the turn of the 20th century, the great black sociologist W.E.B. Du Bois wrote a book in which he studied the black family structure in the early part of the 20th century, and he announced that the black illegitimacy rate in America in the early 20th century was something around 20 to 25%. So it was higher than the white rate, which at the time was really low, 2 or 3%. But of course, it is much lower than the black rate today, which approaches 75%. And of course, this isn't just a black problem, it's a national problem. The white illegitimacy rate has risen dramatically from something like 2 or 3% in the early 20th century to now something like 30%, 33%. Depends whether you're talking about Hispanic or non-Hispanic whites. But the point is simply this, that the breakdown of the family, white and black, has occurred in the 20th century after slavery. In fact, remarkably, one of the achievements of blacks was to pull their families together after slavery, and the real sort of crisis of the black family began in the 1960s. In fact, it coincided not with slavery, but with the liberal and democratic welfare state. And it could be, in fact, I think it's likely that the welfare state had far more to do with the breakdown of the black family. Then you consider something like segregation. Oh, Dinesh, woke means nothing more than we're trying to teach segregation in schools. Well, do your schools teach that, in fact, segregation laws were entirely passed by the Democratic Party? The Democratic Party had a sort of lock on what was then called the Democratic Solid South, and every segregation law across the South was passed by Democratic officials, Democratic legislators, signed by Democratic governors. So where is this taught in the schools? Show me. Show me the textbooks that highlight this particular fact. And the answer is they don't, not just in the school level, but also at the college level. This is one of the biggest secrets in American education, including American higher education. And this is really why people are, when I go to campus to speak and I mention these facts, people are really shocked and they can't really believe it, and they've got to pull out their phones and check me out to make sure I'm telling the truth. Now let's turn to the issue of sexual identity and gender identity, which is today under the trans orbit considered to be highly fluid. I am what I think I am. I am what I imagine myself to be. I can, in a sense, dictate my own gender, no matter what my biological inheritance. No matter how I'm born, I get to say what I really am. But just go back 10 or 20 years when we were told by the same people the exact opposite. In other words, in the debate going back to the 1980s and 1990s over gay issues, if you use the term sexual preference, people would say, sexual preference? No, Dinesh. Gay people don't have a preference. They don't choose to be gay. They're obviously gay. They have no choice in the matter. They're born that way. So So at that time, the LGBTQ community marched under the banner of sexual inevitability. We're born that way. We don't really have a choice. So what do you expect us to do? This is the deck of cards that we've been dealt with. And so tolerance is the appropriate solution. Now, the same woke community abandons that. You don't hear a whole lot today about being born that way. Now you hear about the fact that sexual identity is entirely a matter of what's in your mind. If you choose to be a woman, you are a woman. And so the point I'm trying to make is the wokesters can't even make up their own mind. They say one thing on Monday, another thing on Tuesday, another thing on Wednesday, and then they cancel you if you don't believe what they said on Wednesday, but only believe what they said on Monday. This is exactly like the vicissitudes in communist societies where the great leader, Stalin, keeps changing his mind, and you've got to be up with what his latest thoughts are, because you'll be executed, not just because you didn't quote him, but if you quoted him from the wrong time. This is what he used to believe, but now he believes something completely different. So what I'm getting at here is that wokeness is a controversial, destructive ideology that keeps shifting its own premises. No wonder people don't want to go along with it. And this idea that we're anti-woke because we're against diversity, we're against inclusion, we're against truth, we don't want things to be taught about in schools, none of this makes any sense.